Welcome back to Aaron's Smoke Break, your quick hit geopolitical update. Cut through the static, get to reality. Today we are covering Cuba, the Islamic regime, Strait of Hormuz, and Ukraine, where the battlefield is being rewritten in real time. Energy, war, power. Let's get into it. 90 miles off the coast of Florida, an island is going dark. Blackouts, fuel shortages, people in the streets, and now protests turning violent. Even attacks on Communist Party offices. But to understand why Cuba is here, you don't start in 2026. You go back over a century. It starts with war, the Spanish-American War. The United States steps in, claiming liberation, no conquest. But what comes next is control. The Platt Amendment gives Washington the right to intervene, and Guantanamo Bay, still American to this day. Cuba wasn't a colony, but it also wasn't free, and they never forgot. Then everything changes. The Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro takes power and aligns with the Soviet Union. For the United States, this is a nightmare. A communist state 90 miles away. And then the mistake, the Bay of Pigs. A US-backed invasion that completely fails. It doesn't weaken Castro. It makes him stronger. It proves his message. America is coming. Then comes the moment everything nearly ends, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Nuclear weapons in Cuba.
He has two statements. He calls the nation's stockpiling of war materials excessive, and he hails the Organization of American States for censuring Cuba for being dominated by a red regime.
6 resolutions representing a 6-point program were passed by the conference early this morning. Not a single nation joined Cuba in voting against these resolutions. The 20 other nations of this conference joined in a vigorous declaration against communist penetration of this hemisphere in full support for the Alliance for Progress and to expel Cuba from the Inter-American Defense Board. For the first time, the independent American states have declared with one voice that the concept of Marxist-Leninism is incompatible with the Inter-American system, and they have taken explicit steps to protect the hemisphere's ability to achieve progress with freedom.
The fear was real, but so were the consequences, because every move to stop Cuba pushed it closer to the Soviets. And then after that, everything freezes. Sanctions, isolation, pressure, year after year, decade after decade. The strategy? Squeeze the system until it breaks, but it never does. It adapts, it survives, it hardens. Then the change. Barack Obama, he looks at 50 years of failure and tries something new. Diplomacy, travel, connection. Instead of forcing a change, he tries to expose Cuba to it, show them what we have. Then Donald Trump, and the door slams shut. Sanctions return, pressure increases, restrictions tighten. Back to the old playbook, force change from the outside. Then Joe Biden. Not a full reset, not a full escalation. Pressure stays. Some signals of easing, but no real shift. Stalemate. And now, today, Cuba is running out of fuel. The lights are going out. Food shortages, economic collapse, and people are starting to push back. We took Venezuela. That was a major supply of their oil. Protests, unrest, anger in the streets. And for the first time in a long time, the system is shaking. So what is Cuba? It's not just a communist state. It is the result of intervention, fear, survival, and pressure from the outside. The United States feared what Cuba could become, and Cuba became what it believed it had to be. Now, for the first time in decades, it is being tested from within. Let's talk about the Islamic regime, because this situation has real consequences. The United States, alongside Israel, made a decision. We chose to act. Now, here's the reality. Just because we made that call does not mean NATO has to follow. NATO is a defense alliance, not an offensive one. So what you're seeing right now isn't betrayal. It is the rules being followed. Now, I can still disagree with Europe. I can argue they've gotten too comfortable, that decades under American protection have made them hesitant, less willing to take risks. But here's the part Americans miss. Europe does not operate like we do. They don't have our resources. They don't have energy independence. Their entire system depends on access to the world. It's why they empired so quickly. Energy, raw materials, industrial metals, food outputs. They import a massive portion of what they need. So when Europe looks at the Islamic regime, they are not just thinking military. They are thinking trade routes, stability, supply chains. Because if those break, their system feels it immediately. The United States can absorb the pressure. Europe can't do that the same way. They have to stay connected even with regimes they don't trust. That's not softness, that is survival. Now zoom out. This goes beyond the Islamic regime. We are really talking about the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important choke points on the planet. A huge portion of global oil moves through that narrow passage. If that gets disrupted, everything reacts. Markets, prices, global stability. Now connect that to Russia and China. The Islamic regime's oil doesn't just matter by volume. It matters how it is traded. If it is sold in US dollar, our currency and our economy holds. But if it shifts to rubles or yuan, that starts changing the game. It puts pressure on the dollar. It gives rivals more room to operate. So securing the Strait of Hormuz isn't just military positioning, it is economic strategy. It removes leverage from the Islamic regime, it limits options for Russia, and it slows momentum for China. It does not stop them. So when you look at the situation, don't just see a regional conflict. Look at the bigger picture. Energy, trade, currency, power. This is about who sets the rules for the global system. Now let's talk about Ukraine, because this war has changed how war is fought. Right now, the front line isn't moving like people think. Yeah, there are troops on the line, but they are not maneuvering like traditional warfare because drones have changed everything. We are talking about a constant surveillance grid. FPV drones, strike drones, recon drones. If you mass forces, you get spotted. If you get spotted, you get hit. In the military, a massive forces is a target of opportunity. So what you end up with is a kind of no man's land, a kill zone that stretches for miles. And that makes offensives extremely difficult. Now that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Russia is still pushing in multiple areas. Places like Sloviansk, Antonievka, and Donetsk are grinding forward, but Ukraine is still fighting back, launching localized counterattacks, especially in Zaporizhzhia. So the reality is this war is not frozen. It is grinding. Now here's something a lot of people aren't talking about. Ukraine is not just receiving help anymore. They are giving it. They're sharing drone warfare experience, tactics, technology, even helping US partners deal with drone threats. That's important because nobody has more real world experience than Ukraine. Now let's talk about something new. Reza Pahlavi and Volodymyr Zelensky. These two have been meeting, Munich, Paris, and the message is pretty clear. They both see the same fight against authoritarian regimes that are backing Russia. The Islamic regime is a big part of that, especially with drones. Now let's talk about support because this is where things get political. The United States has given massive support to Ukraine. We are talking well over $100 billion. Weapons, money, intelligence. We're the ones that told them they were going to get attacked and nobody else in Europe believed us. But here's the part people argue about. There have been moments where that flow slowed down or paused. And yes, that has real life consequences. Ukraine needs constant supply to keep pressure on Russia. They're already outnumbered and out material. But here's one thing you don't hear enough. This is not just a US issue. Europe has its own problems getting aid through. And one country in particular keeps coming up. Hungary. Hungary has blocked or slowed EU level support, tying it to energy issues like the Druzhba pipeline. So when aid gets delayed, it's not always Washington. Sometimes it is Europe themselves. And to be fair, Europe has given a lot too, tens of billions. But politically, they are not always aligned, and that creates a lot of friction. So where does this leave us? You've got a war where drones lock the battlefield, Russia keeps pushing, Ukraine keeps resisting, and support is absolutely critical. Because without constant flow, this balance can shift. And right now, the outcome of this war still depends on who keeps showing up. So when you step back and look at everything we covered today, Cuba is being tested from within, the Islamic regime is sitting near one of the most critical choke points on earth, and Ukraine is still locked in a grinding war that is reshaping modern combat. Right now, This is a wait and see moment. But one thing is clear, the Strait of Hormuz is priority number one. And given the recent bombing campaigns on the Islamic regime's coast, that is still a work in progress. Europe also needs to think long term, because a future beyond the Islamic regime means energy security that doesn't run through Russia. And don't ignore the regional shit. Arab states are watching, and some are already turning against the Islamic regime, because when this war started, they immediately started bombing them too, despite those countries trying to stay out of it. And that makes their command appear highly decentralized, which risks further escalation. This isn't just about one conflict. It's about energy, trade, security, power, and global powers trying to see who shapes what comes next. So if you want more breakdowns like this, like, subscribe, and share. Because the more this grows, the more we can keep cutting through the static and just getting down to reality. Cut through the bullshit, get to reality. This is Aaron Smokebreak. Stay frosty out there.
Press to actually admit that the United States is decimating the radical Iranian regime's military in a way the world has never seen before. Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective.
Хлопці, сюди йде, хлопці! Артур!
What is your name?
Francis.
Сосать, уголек.
This disturbing video appears to show an African recruit in the Russian army with a landmine strapped to his chest. He is being ordered to storm Ukrainian positions on the front lines.
I didn't see it. It is so traumatizing. Francis is my son.
Francis is among a growing number of African men fighting for Russia in Ukraine. I've spoken to about a dozen of them from Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria, who say they were forced into the Russian army and onto the front lines with barely any training. How long was the training?
3 weeks.
Many told me they were offered well-paying civilian jobs like drivers or electricians, and the money was good.
They are lying to people. The money that they tell people they pay, that is not true.
Most of the African fighters in Ukraine told me they're desperate to escape, but there's no way out. They feel trapped in a war with countless casualties and even racism from their Russian commanders.
You need to escape or you die. It's only two ways.
همیهنان عزیزم، ما اکنون در مراحل بسیار حساسی از مبارزه نهاییمون قرار گرفته ایم. از شما میخواهم که در اسرع وقت لوازم لازم رو تهیه بکنید و به خاطر امنیت خودتون خیابانها را ترک بکنید و در منازلتون بمانید. همچنان دست به اعتصاب بزنید و سر کار نروید. برای نشان دادن اتحاد خودتان شعارهای شبانه را ادامه دهید. نیروهای انتظامی و نظامی، این آخرین فرصتی است که حساب خودتون رو از نیروهای سرکوبگر جدا بکنید و به مردم بپیوندید. در انتظار فراخوان نهایی من باشید.